This week in New Mutants 26 through 31, it's Legion, Mutant Gladiators, and an unexpected return in Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz's swan song on the title.
Warning. The following podcast is utter nonsense and may cause agoraphobia, kleptomania, insomnia, and oppositional defiance disorder. We are required by law to provide you with this disclaimer for hazardous materials.
And welcome back to Hazardous Materials, last week's comics this week, wherein we normally do talk about last week's comics this week, but not this time.
This time we are rounding out our New Mutants coverage, covering issues 26 through 31 of Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz's run. And that is, of course, easily available in the New Mutants Epic Collection Volume 2, the Demon Bear Saga, hopefully available at your local comic book store.
My name is Casey Johnson. With me, as always,
Gideon Gonzalez.
So we're going to jump right into this.
Yes. So, last we saw the New Mutants.
Last we saw issue 27. We named it with 25.
We'd gotten a pretty middling Cloak and Dagger story, middling being a little generous. It's definitely the weakest story in the stretch.
Easily.
But we had gotten a little tease of old David Haller, the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller.
And lead singer of Static X.
I don't know if the Static X one has the hair, though.
He sure seems like he did.
It's possible. But so we open up on Muir Island.
That splash page.
Yeah. So I'd hope that Tom Corsi and Sheridan Freelander, the couple that got turned into Native Americans during Demon Bear Saga, we just kind of fade away and we could forget about them. But no, they're back.
Check them out.
They're hitting the gym. They are wearing their fringed boots in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Not a great look.
Headbands.
And a psychic scream rips out. And so I know you're no Sienkiewicz's fan.
I'm not. I'm sorry.
I, however, am. So this sequence of Legion going just nuts and doing some exorcist shit is great. Totally up my alley. He's levitating over the bed with his limbs outstretched, kind of suggesting the Reagan being tied up imagery. Mm-hmm. And woo boy, that panel where he's cackling and you see the hee-hees in his hair. Mm-hmm. All timer.
Well,
so good.
Now, as I was reading this, I discovered that as a kid, I apparently completely glossed over the Legion storyline, which is completely understandable when I saw the character as a kid and I saw the storyline and just how absolutely word dense these issues are.
Yeah, these are, even for Claremont standards, these are particularly text heavy.
So I totally checked out and I had to actually reread this. Most of my information about Legion and this particular storyline came straight from Marvel Universe. So when I'm going in, I'm like, what are you talking about? The Arab? Who's the Arab? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I will say there is a number of things in this story that have not aged well that really jumped out at me. One was the constant use of catch the Arab, get him, he's a villain, yada yada, which was really uncomfortable. But more than that, and this is a very big problem with the run, and generally with a lot of comics from the 80s that deal with mental health issues, they use autism and schizophrenia interchangeably to describe Legion's condition.
Yeah.
Neither of those are at all accurate terms. He doesn't display symptoms for either of them because, again, DID, which is what they were looking for, is not the same as schizophrenia, which is certainly not the same as autism. And I know we're now like 35 years on. We have much better handle on mental health.
And in 1985, no one was talking about autism.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that was what you do. It's like a Stephen King story. It's like, oh, I'm going to add a little bit of split personality to make it spooky, which is pretty shitty and like just kind of adds to the stigmatism around those diseases.
So you think they were just using it as buzzwords to kind of explain the reason why he was a little.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it sounds like I'm trying to justify it, but I'm not. I understand why they did it because it's like, oh, this is a cool, interesting thing we can play with, but it really just shows how uninformed they were on the topic and how uninformed the public at large was, and how a lot of information from this stuff would come from entertainment for the common people, and just how much misinformation was out there and the feedback loops that would generate.
I mean, for the most part, we really never talk to or see David.
Yeah, David is talked about. He's talked around.
Yeah, he's He's objectified as a goal.
Yes, he's 100% just a plot device. He has such little, if any, agency in the story.
And just when you think at the very end where you think you're talking to him, you're just talking to
his alters,
Jamil, Cindy, or Jack.
Yeah. And there's some interesting stuff with his alters, but again, like, it doesn't really outweigh the very, very negative connotations that much of the story carries. And
I have one big question, one looming question. If Cindy is part of his personality, does that make him bi? And if bi, is he into Doug?
No, David's not. Cindy is. They're alters. They're separate people.
Oh. You're supposed to do something with that. Well, okay. I don't know jack stuff about any of the split personalities. So I've always kind of wondered if the impulses of one are indicative in the personalities of another. But hey, who knows?
Generally, no. Like generally, they're pretty distinct, which is why it's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'm not a mental health expert. Don't take my word for it.
But you're passing off as one very well.
From what I understand, because I used to be like, wow, I love all this Moon Knight stuff and all this Legion stuff. And then I kind of educated myself on like, oh, those aren't really great depictions of that.
Yeah, Moon Knight is still depicted as pretty much the most mentally ill Marvel hero out there to this day.
Yeah. And I think some modern runs do better than a lot of older ones. But I still don't think it's quite 100% there, you know? Like it's still very much a cartoon take on DID.
Do you think, and this might be going off the yellow brick road just ever so slightly, but do you think a rectification of Moon Knight, basically healing him of his mental illnesses, is the right path for the character?
I think that's worse. It's kind of like when they took Barbara Gordon out of the chair, where instead of... I think the better path forward for Moon Knight would be to just make it a better representation instead of acting like it's something to be cured, you know?
Because he's not exactly the best representation of
He's not. But I think the potential is there to be reworked into positive representation.
Maybe that's what the TV show is going to be about. Maybe they'll actually heavily focus on that.
That would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
As long as it's not like, I say again, Stephen King boogeyman. Ooh, crazy people are scary.
Oh, he is known for that one.
Yeah. Love Stephen King books, but he definitely has his bucket of tropes that he dips into.
Yes, he definitely knows where he's going with most of his stuff. And it is... Looney Tunes is his favorite place to go to as far as any kind of villain.
But we've gotten way off track.
We have, and I knew we were doing it, but let's get right back where we're going.
You can't really talk about the story without getting into
mental illness.
The problematic elements of its depictions.
Mm-hmm.
But a positive, very good bit about this is when Warlock talks to the Blackbird in Birdsong because he doesn't want it to be lonely. It's very sweet. It's such a good Warlock
He does
moment.
talk to it in Blackbird sing song because Danny picks up on it. It's like, I've heard that before. It's a blackbird. And you see him just leaning on the blackbird saying, we're going to go someplace. It's okay. I really miss you. Bye-bye.
And along with that, you get kind of talking about problematic elements. Claremont goes back and tries to rectify the story between Xavier and Gabrielle Haller, where Xavier, for once in his life, admits he did wrong and was like, hey, that was pretty messed up what I did. I kind of took advantage of you as my patient.
And she validates it.
She does.
I thought that was the wrong way to go.
It was. I didn't like her response to it. I liked Charles trying to make amends. I don't like that Gabrielle Haller was so cool with it.
She gave him an out.
Yeah, basically. And it's weird.
Have we seen this character in the modern age?
Gabrielle Haller?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I would willing to bet that she's dead.
I want to say she popped up in flashbacks in Cy Spurrier's Legion story, but that's been a few years since I read that.
And in the second or third issue, her little skunk stripe really threw me off. I was like, how did Rogue get in this story? Oh, wait, that's not Rogue. Wait a minute. How did Rogue get in this story?
Gabrielle Haller's always had that. I think. I'm fairly certain that was like a defining feature and when she showed up in X-Men 161.
But not in that first issue. She doesn't have it at all.
She
and
totally
the second
does.
issue, it just pops up.
Oh, it's not white. It is light blue in those. So a coloring error.
A distinct coloring error.
We also get a really quick, cool little Emma Frost moment where she puts old Empath in his place.
Yeah. No. We're back to the whole Claremont B stories and now C stories when we're dealing with the Massachusetts Academy, because we do see Empath. As a matter of fact, at the end of the story, when they're doing their biop picks, he's the first one there. Yeah. I really think that Claremont really wanted to do more with
The Hellions.
Mr. De La Rocha.
Well, say not to get too dark, but the powers that be would say, screw any plans you had for the Hellions down the line. I'm going to blow them all up.
You know what? Speaking of interference, and I want to talk about this because it does come into play. I thought that this particular storyline and the one that followed it, the Gladiator storyline, was a really good showcase of how someone's story can be completely interrupted with a crossover.
Jim Shooter jumps in that back half, and you can really tell. We'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah.
Like, let's get through the Legion stuff first. Like, because I
have so many thoughts on this, and they're all happening right now.
We gotta keep this somewhat organized and linear.
Okay.
So, some more great Sienkiewicz showcases, yada yada. Magneto and Lee Forrester starting a romance, which very surprising, but I'm very into it.
And it's a little hot and cold.
Yeah, they get development through it.
Yeah.
So Magneto has a nightmare, and he's throwing his bed around, bed knobs and broomstick style.
Yeah.
She calms him down. They share a moment,
and that moment gets. In comics wise, they basically hooked up.
They did.
They really hooked up.
100%.
Because you can tell they hooked up because afterwards she has mucho human regret.
Yes. And she is swimming. Because they're still on the island of R'lyeh.
Yeah, because that's where you are.
And she sees a statue of Cthulhu with a couple of slave girls at his feet. And she's like,
so hilarious that Cthulhu is in this.
And she's like, oh my God, is that me? Like, is this the power dynamics between me and Magneto? And she starts to think like,
I'm human.
Yeah.
He's mutant.
He hates humans.
Yes. He is Magneto.
And so they confront these issues. They kind of make up a little bit.
But not completely.
Not completely. Enough of a seed of doubt is there because Magneto has to go engage in Secret Wars too.
Yes.
Which
he does become a major part of Secret Wars. And he's starting to wear already ridiculous 80s uniforms.
He's got those side cuts, which I'm all about.
The first one you ever see him in, that's Sans Bucket, is in this issue where he's showing up with his
I like that outfit a lot more than the Big M, which he gets later.
I was not a big fan of the Big M, but I can't help but think of the Big M when I'm thinking about the Trial of Magneto.
Yeah, I know. That cover where it's just...
Yeah, that's a great cover.
Bad costume, though.
It's a bad costume.
So anyways, Legion did some brain work and took out Moira. And so old Chucky Z and Danny Moonstar, since she's got kind of psychic powers.
Yeah, it also should be noted that when Legion does the hoogie on somebody, he basically just vacates them. Yeah. They're just empty. Real empty.
Just shut them down. And so they turn into some cool Silver Surfery looking bods as they're going through the mental landscape.
They're in the spirit world.
And I love this shit. I am all about like the mental landscape as a place where you can go and have a cool adventure. So, did you ever play the game Psychonauts?
Yes.
One of my favorite games of all time.
Really?
And yeah, a big part of that was the idea of the mental landscape as like a platformer area. And I revisit every few years, and I'm always just so pleased with it. And I'm still mad that Psychonauts 2 was in development hell, was finally getting made, and then got put in development hell again.
I thought it came out.
I don't believe it did. They did a PSVR game that was kind of like to bridge Psychonauts 1 and 2. But I believe Psychonauts 2 is still on the back burner because I haven't heard anything about it coming out.
I was going through my Steam stuff, and you know how it gives you that little thing going, hey, this is what's going up on Steam. And I swore I saw Psychonauts 2. I was like, oh, hey, it got made. It
might be a pre-order.
Maybe it slipped out and you just didn't know.
Maybe it did, but I
you got
no
something exciting.
I got to check it out after the episode. But yeah, man, I love this. I love these visuals so much. The blasts, I love the flight. I love the creepy faces merging together from his altars.
Which you find out his reveal as the fact that he does refer to himself as Legion.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, the big issue, David's problem in finger quotes, is that he and his mother were attacked by terrorists, and Legion made their brains explode But at that time, he absorbed their leader into his psyche. And so it splintered his already pretty fractured mind even further, because along with his alters, he now has another person's mind in there, which screws up his landscape to look like this. So it's a fusion of Paris and Beirut.
Yeah, because it does actually happen in Paris. And it should be also noted that Legion's mother is heavily involved in Israeli politics.
Yeah, she is an ambassador, I believe, from Israel.
She's looking to become the prime minister.
Yeah.
So she's knee deep in politics.
Yeah,
in
and
that,
she was a
country.
Holocaust survivor. Gabriel Haller is a really good character.
Mhm.
Very interesting. And yeah, a lot of the Middle Eastern terrorist stereotypes are at play here, and that was a little uncomfortable to read. But that said, we get some great fights in this.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is always my go-to with this story, is that there's a lot of elements in it that haven't aged well, that do make me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But Sienkiewicz's visuals are so strong. Claremont's sequences are so well plotted out. And yes, his purple prose that we love to complain about is so beautifully descriptive that I can't just throw the book out.
Yeah, honestly,
it's too interesting.
I might
which
not
is a problem.
I might not be so upset by the fact that he does do word salad, but because I'd never read this before, beyond the Marvel Universe entry, I had to slow through paragraphs of words before, because, I will delay things till the last minute. We've talked about this off camera. I'm a procrastinator of the highest order. So now imagine I've got 3 hours before I'm supposed to show up here, and I have to go through all of that. It was hard. I'm sitting there just staring at my iPad going, Jesus Christ. It's like reading the Gideon's Bible.
Possibly coming to a show near you.
Indeed.
So we're introduced to Legion's alters. One is Jack Wayne, who is this kind of confident projection of TV stereotypes that he's mashed together.
He's Magnum.
He does look like Tom Selleck. So we get our prerequisite Tom Selleck reference for this arc.
And he's he controls the telekinetic aspect of Haller's power sets.
Yes. Then we've got Cindy, who is the pyrokinetic.
Mm-hmm. And she's the one that caused the explosion in Mur Island.
Yes, she is the one when Legion is slaughtering the Reavers with fire. That's her work.
Yeah.
And she has this 80s punk aesthetic going on.
Everybody has Legion's hair.
Yes, they all have the tall do.
Yeah.
Not as extreme as Legion, but it's suggested really well. Because she's got this punk haircut. Jack's got this big pompadour that starts to suggest the shape.
It's a serious pompadour.
I don't believe Jamail does, though.
You never see him because he never unwraps.
Oh, that's true. He's always wearing a turban, which again...
And he's not really...
Yeah, and he's not
He's just trapped there.
Yes. And that's one of the things I really find interesting about it, is that Jamail is not, as they think throughout the story and they're constantly battling with them, he's not attacking David. He's just trying to untangle their minds.
He's the one that's actually, because apparently before all of this started, before he really got active, David's personality had fractured into the double digits.
Mm-hmm.
He had several, which they talk about years later about all the different personalities. You actually see them. They're almost like the Iron Man room. There's all the different armors, all the different personalities.
That was one of the things I really liked in Spurrier's run on the character.
Yeah. So Jamail was basically had because he had these telepathic abilities, he dipped into David's sense of innocence. And, he finds out that, this boy is not the evil Israeli that he is led to believe through his own personal dogma. And he's like, okay, well, I want to put them together.
Yeah. And I like that depth they give Jamail. It feels very 80s, 90s, new age. We've all got to just tap into our humanity and we'll all see it, which it's that kind of thing that strips away the nuances of all these kind of conflicts.
And it also feels like it's a twist trope, because then you find out that Jamil is the guy that's putting it all together. Exactly. And Jack is the piece of shit that has been making it all hard.
Jack, the action movie stereotype is very dead set on it's the Arabs' fault, yada yada.
And you should have really knew that was what was going to happen, because the moment he meets Xavier's like, I'm forced to like this guy because he makes me feel like I wanted to when I was young and idealistic.
I was going to say, you can tell because Xavier trusts him, and Xavier is a terrible judge of character.
Horrible judge of character.
But that said, great judge of character, Rain Sinclair.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I enjoyed her in this.
Yes, she does really well for herself in the story. Between having to see her abusive father figure, who later turns out to actually be her father.
Right.
And then going to here where she's super useful in the mindscape.
I was really surprised that Reverend Craig did not come back in the story after that.
Yeah, there's a couple other elements that I'm surprised. And we'll get to at the gladiator thing. Because very frustrating. This collection 100% ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
But we'll get to that when we get to that.
All right.
One last thing before we move on from the Legion story is I love the visualization of Jamail trying to repair Legion's psyche by going into like David's true self in the dome and it's showing as these like glass panes for memories. I thought that was a really cool visual.
You know, as much as I dislike Sienkiewicz's crazy work, and it's not so much the fact that I don't think he's a great artist, it's because I don't like interpretive or surreal comic art. I like clean, realistic art. But when he does his big gatefolds of like large vistas and backgrounds, those look fantastic.
Yes. Like those, you could hang those in a museum.
Yeah, especially the one where you see inside the dome and you see like the Eiffel Tower is off its side and you can see the Notre Dame arc right over here to the right. That looks awesome.
Yeah.
I forget what the name of that thing is.
Man, it's just so inventive. It's a delight to be. I know you said you like clear art. I like art that I can like dip my teeth into and have to study it and just really get the emotion that he's going for from it.
I'm a Bagley. I got Grummett.
And I love Bagley. I love Grummett, but I can like breeze through them. I look at it and I get it. Oh, yeah. Like Sienkiewicz, you gotta kind of work with it. It's like reading Faulkner. You can't just breeze right through it. You gotta work with it.
So what you're trying to say is that you have to be some kind of a deep-seated intellectual and appreciative of art.
Rick and Morty is for intellectuals, actually. No, this is actually like a positive.
You're not trying to hipster me, are you?
No, I'm just saying there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is a lot
to appreciate beyond like a first glance.
I guess it's because sometimes I do want to flip through a book and get the idea of what's going on and move on. And this is because when I go to a comic book store, I don't come back with one comic. I don't come back with two. I come back with a stack. Yeah. I want to devour my stack.
See, I want to enjoy my stack. I want to.
You do.
Like,
I can't. I'm impulsive. I like do. Give me more. I want to know what that issue is all about.
I want to have the aroma. I want to
savor.
Get the proper glass.
You spit out the wine when you're done.
A fine vintage.
Now that we figured out what we're really all about on this one, let's move on to the Guardians. Not the Guardians, but the Gladiators. The
American Gladiators, baby. And this is a sequel to a story that I enjoy, which is Beauty and the Beast, which is a Jim Shooter, Beast, and Dazzler team-up tale.
I didn't enjoy that at all.
With some Bill Sienkiewicz covers. It's very weird. It's 100% just out of left field. But those two characters have a great dynamic.
This came out in 85. And let me tell you, in 85, I had zero interest in romance books of any sort.
Even with Bouncing Blue Beasts?
Oh, you know what? I couldn't appreciate Beast back then. It wasn't exciting for me.
Avengers.
I was a freaking kid, man.
I was going to say, but in Avengers, him and Wonder Man wearing their plaid suits and going to movies. And I realized that wasn't a very exciting thing for a kid.
I could not appreciate Wonder Man and Beast for being the buddies that they were until I was in high school.
That's fair.
And by that time, it was all hindsight until Perez came back and he kind of brought that back.
I mean, Beast smooches Wonder Man when he comes back.
You know what the sad thing is? I can't see current Beast, the Beast we have now, fulfilling that role anymore.
They actually did a really fun little arc in Uncanny Avengers teaming up Beast and Wonder Man again, and it was pretty fun.
I saw that. It was like a Beast story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
Beast story.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah. Simon Williams is a character I 100% don't care about unless it's in the context of Beast.
I have to agree. He's dull. He's he's basically the background of any kind of Vision story.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I love Wanda so much, but she's in love with me kind of in the form of Vision. He was my brother.
He's had like 10 costumes and only 2 good ones.
Yeah.
And that's the smoking jacket
and the wife beater.
No, I hate that costume.
You don't like the wife beater?
No, the second good costume is when he becomes like just pure energy.
I don't know.
And he's just all purple with a little red dot.
I like the simple blue and red with the W. Not only the wife beater, but also the full body suit that has the short gloves.
I don't like any of those costumes. Nothing beats wearing a cool jacket and shades
with those little rocket things on the sides of his hips.
It's great.
Yeah,
him and Beast can go see a movie and then go kick ass in the same evening.
Very much so.
And he doesn't look out of place in either.
And he has gray hair that he has to dye.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Love Simon. They are truly the blue and gold of the Marvel Universe.
I really wish that Nathan Fillion could have been Simon as they originally had cast him.
With Kelsey Grammer as Beast. We could have had it all.
That would have been great.
But anyways.
So basically we find out that this whole story is what's happening to our leftover heroes.
Yes.
That while the whole Legion A story is happening, you got the B story going on with Amara, Sunspot, and Sam and Sam's girl, as we find out. And an appearance of Strong Guy.
Yes, Strong Guy's first appearance, actually, in New Mutants number 29, because after unsuccessfully trying to stop their friends' kidnappers while in their bathing suits.
Yes.
Sam's got to call in a favor from his old flame, Lila Cheney.
Ileana does spend quite a bit of time in her bikini.
And Sam in his shorts.
Yes.
But they go to Lila's place and are interrupted by the human wall that is Guido. And yeah, very, very quick appearance. I think he's got like 5 panels total.
He's not even named.
She calls him Guido.
Does she?
When he drops them off in the limo, she calls him Guido.
I honestly think that this character was a joke character. It was not meant to go anywhere until Peter David got a hold of him.
Oh, yeah. Well, he does show up in Muir Island Saga, but just as like muscle. And he shows up a couple times in Claremont's X-Men.
I thought he showed up in that Muir Island issue because that was the issue where they jumped into second X Factor.
He's in a couple issues before that.
Okay.
So he next shows up. When Dazzler goes through the Siege Perilous, he finds her on the beach and recognizes her because she was on tour with Lila.
Right.
And so he like takes her in, and then they go to Muir Island together, and the Shadow King is having his own gladiator games there, which a little bit of foreshadowing for this story.
Yes, indeed.
But he's running gladiator games on Muir Island. And so like the first thing we see of it is Guido fighting Rogue. And there's a great cover.
Now I can understand that while they got a little confusing here because they do show lots of silhouettes of the bad guy. And in issue 31, she's right on the cover.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But they do refer to the person as him, which is heavy allusion to the fact that it's a man possessing the body of a woman.
So the cat's out of the bag. The Shadow King is the villain, but who he is hiding behind, we're going to preserve that twist.
We're going to preserve it.
Because we're going to talk about it a lot.
We are.
But first I want to talk about this amazing magic look. Like, it's so good.
It's so 80s.
She's got the wild hair, the big old pink shades, and there's Guido in the background also.
Yes,
you can see him in
she's
that
got
panel.
those Cyclops shades that you saw from that. Remember that one model that put herself on billboards in Los Angeles just to put herself up on billboards?
No, but that's pretty rad, and I appreciate the hustle.
Evangeline, I believe was her name.
Oh, good for her.
But that was her thing. She wasn't in anything. She wasn't an actor, but she had money. And she goes, I'm just going to put myself up on billboards. And she became a staple of Los Angeles in the 80s.
That's amazing.
And that's what she kind of looks like.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
So Lila gets them into the gladiator games. The kids are going to save their friends when old Magneto crashes in with his
big M.
Big ol' M. And he's like, come, Sam. Your planet needs you. And then we get a Secret Wars 2 derailment.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. It actually physically looks like the story was going. Everybody was invested in the story. And then big old Jimmy Shooter, boom, right on the top going, Secret Wars 2 is out right now.
All right, Chris, not only are you doing a sequel to my story, but you're also going to tie it into my current story.
Yep.
And I really wish this Epic Collection included Secret Wars 2 #1.
Because you have no clue what the hell was going on at the beginning of this issue.
Yeah, so we go from the Gladiator Pit with our core cast of Dazzler, Lila, Magic, and Sam.
To this splash page of Ileana, full demoned out in limbo, freaking out. And if you're only reading New Mutants, you have no damn clue what the hell is going on.
With Sam, Amara, Kitty, and Rachel.
Yeah.
And they give you a solid like block of words to tell you what happened in Secret Wars #2, which I was very thankful for. Secret Wars 2 #1, I should say.
And if you're looking at the splash page of this,
it's a really cool page.
It's a really cool page, but then you're wondering, how did Rain get home? Oh no, never mind. That's Rachel Summers.
Again, confusing Rachel for Rain in this series. But what we get here, though, is one of my favorite little bits of subtext. Is that Kitty Pryde's the only other person that can wield Ileana's soul sword?
Yes.
It's because they're soulmates.
Yep. They're soul sisters.
This isn't the first. This is the first time, but it would not be the last time that Kitty wields the soul sword.
Indeed.
And so they get back in. They're like, Dazzler, you gotta fight in the Gladiator games for a cover. And Dazzler's like, well, I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie and also like a fame junkie.
I really want to be a center of attention.
I really love this element of Dazzler, and I don't think it comes up enough.
Because it should be said that for a very long time, Dazzler was the pop star in Marvel Universe, and then she got outed as a mutant, and it was a big deal. It was a Marvel graphic novel. And it had a picture of her and had Muty like written over her.
Dazzler the movie, yeah.
It was Dazzler the movie, exactly. It was all about her being outed as a mutant and how the world just freaking turned on her.
I will say Dazzler the movie has a ton of problems as a story, but the effects of it in the Dazzler book are really good and interesting. Dazzler the movie... Maybe one of these days we'll do a whole episode on it, but I was very let down when I first read it.
I honestly have not read Dazzler movies since the 80s.
It doesn't hold up.
Really? I gotta know what you're talking about, because it's been decades since I read that book.
There's a lot of, I will say, really bad 80s sexual politics.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which you all see through comic books throughout the 80s, and both, especially in DC.
Yeah, the Dazzler the movie is really bad about it.
Oh,
which we might talk about in a future episode. But for now,
the fallout of what happens to Dazzler is not only felt in this, but it's also felt right after the Mutant Massacre, because that's when she gets taken over by Malice.
Yes,
because she's schlepping equipment now. She's basically now a gopher, maybe backup keyboardist for this band. And that's when Malice finds her at her absolute lowest and goes, you could be a star like me, Allison. It could be all great. Let me take you over and we'll kill mutants together.
Chris Claremont doing what he does best, picking up Jim Shooter scraps. Turn them into gold. Which Dazzler is a Jim Shooter creation.
Yes.
Well, there was a whole committee. Dazzler's very much a character created by committee, but Jim Shooter was really the character who pushed her as the next big thing.
Yeah, because she was supposed to be like a movie tie-in.
Yes.
That never happened.
Yes, because they made the decision to make a disco-themed character in 1982.
Not the first time.
No, well, Dark Phoenix was what, 79?
Yeah, not the first time that Marvel would make this kind of a gamble and come up with nothing. Remember Nightcat?
No. I have no knowledge of Nightcat.
Look up Nightcat. It's a one-shot. It was clearly done to promote a real life rock star at that time who was going to be called Nightcat. It was a photorealistic cover, went nowhere, just like Dazzler.
I think my favorite thing about, I can't remember who was going to play Dazzler. I think it was Bo Derek was going to be Dazzler. And there would be two rival disco queens, one played by Cher, the other by Donna Summers.
Wow.
Cher's army was going to be the Village People.
Oh my God.
And Donna Summers' army was going to be Kiss. Now, of course, this isn't, I say going to. This was in the script that Jim Shooter knocked out like over a weekend as a pitch proposal.
You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like a more modern recreation of Tommy. Remember the musical?
Yeah.
Tommy, and just how over the top that was?
This would have been like around the same time as Tommy, though, because Tommy the movie came out late 70s,
or even that movie Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts.
Oh, I love that movie. It has a special place in my heart.
It is so over the top.
It's my favorite piece of trivia is because Aerosmith's cover of "Come Together" is much better known than the movie it's from. It's going like, hey, that's from a movie where where Alice Cooper sings "Because," and it's really creepy and better than the original.
Yeah, let's have a movie that's basically thematically the Beatles, but we're gonna have to star the Bee Gees
and Peter Frampton.
And Peter Frampton, who was really big at that time because everybody had a copy of Frampton Comes Alive around that time.
Frampton Comes Alive is amazing.
Yeah,
I don't own any other Frampton albums besides that one.
Except Frampton.
What else
Everybody
do you need?
owns a copy of Frampton Comes Alive that they were old at the time.
I say you can shave it even further and say what more than you need than the long version of "Do You Feel Like We Do."
We're talking about some weird stuff. This almost seems like we should be doing like a podcast on like old esoteric music and its impact on pop culture.
Gideon and Casey's Disco Hour, I don't think is quite the appeal of Hazardous Materials. But so Dazzler reconnects with her old crew from Beauty and the Beast, and she gets in the fight. She's now singing while everyone else is fighting. Kitty Pryde does some hacking.
She's under the impulse of a drug that a horse-faced mutant gave her.
Yes.
Who's called Ivan?
Ivich is the Frankenstein-looking one.
Which is really strange.
I don't remember who the horse guy, but we'll call him Bojack. So Bojack is...
We'll call him Bojack. He's on the cover. We have no idea who his name is.
Bojack once again gets someone re-addicted to something.
Jeez. Makes you wonder. That's where Bojack came from.
So Dazzler is singing while all the kids have to fight a big old robot that's actually Kitty Pryde thrown in there. While the Shadow King chuckles from his box.
And you still can't see her face.
But then
Kitty Pryde sees it.
Kitty Pryde sees it and throws a big old knife up there that reveals it's Karma, but considerably larger.
Like 10 times the size of our skinny Vietnamese hero.
Yeah. And so if I didn't have the context and foreknowledge of what would happen with Karma, I would be super pissed reading this issue.
Yes.
Like super pissed. Because we talked about in prior episodes, I loved Karma. Karma really jumped out at me as being a really cool, interesting character. And I was like, why isn't she in more of this? And why is she always put on the sidelines in New Mutant stuff?
And when you're a kid and a character disappears for 2 years, that's a lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
Because when Jean Grey died in X-Men 137 and then came back in that Fantastic Four issues, that was only 5 years. But when I was a kid, it felt like my entire life was without Jean Grey. It's like, wow, she's dead. And then I'm an adult now. She's back.
I kind of had that same arc with New X-Men to today. So.
Oh, yeah, because
New X-Men was coming out when I was a little kid.
Because New X-Men, Jean Grey was dead for 14 years.
Yes.
Which was astronomical.
Not quite a Barry Allen, but very impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, Barry Allen was gone for 25 years.
Yeah, I think by the time they brought Barry back, Wally had been the Flash for longer than Barry had.
Yeah, because they killed him actually during that year. That's when Crisis came, was in 85. And then he was gone until they brought him back with Rebirth.
No, they brought him back in 2008, Final Crisis.
Oh, I thought he came back in Rebirth.
Nah.
But it was right around that time.
Oh, Flash Rebirth. Yeah. I thought you were talking about Rebirth, the publishing initiative.
No. Yeah. Flash Rebirth.
Flash Rebirth came out the year after Final Crisis.
Yeah.
Because that was like
what's
starting.
That? 1985. That's 25 years plus 8. 33 years. Wow.
Yeah. Well, no, it'd be 23 years.
Yeah. I mean, one could argue that Bucky Barnes has the record, but honestly, Bucky really didn't die until Avengers #4.
Yeah, that's true.
He was killed in retro.
But even then, like Avengers #4 came out, 63, 64, and then Winter Soldier debuts in like 04, 05?
Yeah. It's still a healthy run. Bucky was he was the gold standard on dead heroes.
Until they bring back Uncle Ben.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Ben is a backstory, and I understand what you're trying to say, but Uncle Ben really is a backstory character you can never, ever bring back. Unless you're Gwen Stacy. And then, there's money to be made and comics to be made.
Hey, Thomas Wayne, baby.
Thomas Wayne. That's right. You know what?
Although the real Thomas Wayne's still 6 feet under. So
yeah, but we got another Thomas Wayne.
Yeah, we got Flashpoint Thomas Wayne.
Yeah, and we got Ghost Spider.
Yeah,
which is
we got
alternate
alt versions of it.
Gwen Stacy.
Not quite the same. Gwen's still worm food, as is Tom.
Looking back on these two storylines, Legion took forever for me to read. Gladiators, Oh, it's Los Angeles. Mutant Gladiators. Done.
Gladiators is definitely the weaker story. If I was to rank essentially the four stories that Sienkiewicz and Claremont work on together, I would do Demon Bear, Legion, Gladiators, Cloak and Dagger.
Mm-hmm. The Gladiators thing just felt like it was like the Marvel version of what was it? Her name was it Roulette?
Oh, from DC?
Yeah, who had her own underground fight club that was actually in Justice League Unlimited.
Yes, great episode.
She was also in Justice Society because apparently I think she's like Wildcat's granddaughter or something like that. She's
Something
a legacy
weird.
character.
Yeah.
But I keep feeling like her name is Roulette. I might be wrong.
No, the character's name is Roulette. You are correct.
Okay.
But
so that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it's a weird story. It's not great, and it ends on such a frustrating note.
Yes.
Because, again, if I didn't have the hindsight, I would be super pissed that they treated Karma like this.
Yeah, and I'm really sensitive about the characters I love. As you've seen me, I've raged about the mistreatment of the characters that I love.
I mean, there's clearly a bigger story and plot, and like it's part one of a bigger story. Because again, I say this trade ends on a cliffhanger because it's like next the search for Karma. So I'm assuming the next 3 issues they wrap that up and she's found.
And they do MacGuffin her at the very end with the whole Asgardian thing where I guess when you go out into an Asgardian desert, you can come back skinny because that's exactly what happened. Magic. Because when you go in there, you don't die from dehydration. Your body just wastes away until you're super skinny and fit again.
Comics, everybody.
Yeah.
Not a great.
Show me where that damn desert is right now.
Although Shadow King is one of my favorite characters in X-Men. He's he's my second favorite X-Men villain. Number one is old. I'm blanking on her name right now. Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova is my number one. I
got a buddy of mine. I won't name on this for obvious. Well, I'm gonna name drop you right now. But when we play Hero Clicks, he only plays Shadow King.
Shadow King rules.
Absolutely Shadow King. And you won't play anything else. I'm like, hey, try these figures. No, they're not Shadow King. So when the new X-Men set came out and a new Shadow King came out, I was like, look, new figure. Nice.
Now you can use a new one.
You can use a new one. And he's hulking. He's like this tall now.
Oh, wow.
He's like all in his Shadow King armor. I'm in the side realms. I'm going to fight with this big ass armor.
But what I was going to say is I like having now a new element basically to the huge Shadow King story that Claremont weaves throughout his run. Because this is, again, going back to X-Men 117 when he first appears. And he is very much the overarching villain throughout the run.
Claremont likes Shadow King.
He comes in and out of the story in really fascinating ways. He's part of Storm's origin. There's all the interesting stuff with him and Forge. There's him slowly taking over Muir Island, culminating in Muir Island Saga, which is that's a top 5 X-Men story for me. Not even Claremont scripted, just Claremont.
I had like a brain fart when I was reading the Legion thing, because since I didn't have a hard recollection of the storyline when they were describing Jamil as the Arab, and I was thinking back to the Legion TV series in FXX, which does have Shadow King very deeply entrenched into it. And I was thinking, is the Arab the Shadow King? But then I had to remind myself that the Shadow King is Egyptian.
Yes.
So I was like, God, you're an idiot, Casey. Get your shit together.
It's okay.
I recovered very quickly
from this temporary delusion.
From this temporary delusion, yeah.
But kind of like one more little extra thing while we're talking about the Shadow King.
Hit me.
A thing that I heard on Jane Miles Explained the X-Men, the best X-Men
which
podcast.
I love.
Phenomenal one. There is an episode where they talked about how Chris Claremont had plans for the Shadow King for his run had he gotten to keep going. What he wanted to do was have the Shadow King bond with Senator Kelly, have Senator Kelly become the president, and culminate in Uncanny 300 with Xavier killing Senator Kelly on the White House lawn and absorbing the Shadow King into himself and dying. And so
I wish I could just get Claremont.
Magneto, Cyclops, and Jean then lead the X-Men, and the X-Men are again like on the run. so fascinating. Would have been such a big epic story.
I honestly wish I could just watch a podcast where they just talked about all the stuff that Claremont would have done, could have done. And I know that they brought back Claremont and they let him do, hey, what would you have done if you kept writing past X-Men #3 with Jim Lee? I was like, well, I would have done this. And of course, it's all fantastical what if stuff where people die left and right. It's like, that's not what we're looking for. We would have looked for what you would have done within continuity and the rules that were established. Don't give me a what if story where you burn out Sabretooth's eyes with lightning.
Don't give me X-Men Forever.
Yeah, I don't want X-Men Forever.
But yeah, because you can really see the thing that makes me think that story, believe that story, is it has the same root of his long planned stories. You know, it's not like it is a big explosive event, but it's not like, I guess it's not shallow. It feels planned out and it feels like a natural extension of the stories he was already telling.
I really wanted. I would have loved to read that.
I would have loved another decade of Claremont planting his seeds and watching them weave in and out of the different titles he was working on.
Now, since we're talking about this, let's spend like a couple of minutes talking about why he left after X-Men 3.
Yeah, essentially, from what I understand, I believe it was Bob Harris at the time was his editor, who was very buddy with Jim Lee. And Jim Lee wanted to tell stories where Magneto was a bad guy again. And a lot of times was really driving the ship. I think you can see that particularly. The story I always go to is Extinction Agenda. You can very much tell that was driven by the guys who become the Image founders.
I think that the 90s are largely looked back and scorned because it was during a time where, okay, money always talks when it comes to comics. Well, let's not gloss over that. That's always going to be the way it is. But in the 90s, everybody thought it was all about the artist. And when the artist got more weight than he really should have had, he started thinking, well, maybe I'm a writer. You're not a writer. Stay in your lane. Keep going. And because of that, real writers were pushed out because these high dollar fan pulling in artists were trying to get their vision seen.
Yeah. And what wound up happening is you do see Jim Lee and Will Spertasio collaborate with John Byrne.
Now we've both done
John Byrne,
figures.
who I'm no fan of, I will say, but it is absurd that he was essentially just filling in. He was doing the Stan Lee in the 60s thing of filling in the bubbles, but they would change pages in the story on him. Like he would get pages, write out the script, get the next page. Oh, well, this doesn't match with this now. Guess I have to go back and read the script the entire issue. And I think after a couple times of that, he walked out on X-Men and Uncanny because he was the scripter for both of those stuff.
Do you think that the comic fans by and large have grown as appreciators of the art and now don't put the artists in the same regard that they do in the 90s? Like we've learned our lesson with how crappy 90s comics really largely were.
I think the pendulum, well, yes and no. I think there's still a ton of fans for a lot of 90s artists who have not improved much.
But they don't carry the same weight.
They don't carry the same weight, but they still have a very dedicated fan base who will buy their stuff. Like we see that with Major X, which was just absurd.
Oh, Jesus.
But like,
I'm so glad that thing was so quickly forgotten.
Yes, same.
Like it didn't even exist.
Thank you, Hickman. And speaking of Hickman, I think we all see the pendulum shift away to perhaps an overfocus on writers at the expense of artists. You often see people refer explicitly to the writers of runs as opposed to the writers and artists, where comics is a very collaborative medium.
Even you, the way you introduce books, you always tend to favor the writer, and you'll talk about the writer before you even mention the artist.
I really try to introduce both when I'm talking about books.
And I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying that's the society. Well, not the society, but that's the gel that we're living in as comics fans.
You look at like on the covers, like writer than artist is the format.
Yeah. That's always going to be it.
I appreciate credits when they say we'll credit them both as storytellers. I always think that's a really cool touch.
You mentioned it. I really wish that John Byrne was much more approachable and a decent person.
Don't we all? I wish John Byrne didn't slash and burn every book he was attached to.
That's true. Because he was one of the creators of Sabretooth. So I'm like, oh.
And the man did some great work, but he also did some absolutely horrific work.
Yeah, he did.
You ever read his Doom Patrol?
No.
his worst work, and that's saying something.
I always thought Next Men was his worst work.
Next Men doesn't actively destroy things in the way Doom Patrol is.
Oh, really?
His Doom Patrol run is basically just, hey, you know the most popular version of these characters, the Grant Morrison, Richard Case run? That didn't happen. That's just all that hippy-dippy bullshit. Not in my run. What really happened is that I don't even remember what his excuse was, but it's bad. I think he has like Dorothy kill everyone, or that might be the run after, and then just be like, here's the real Doom Patrol. The only good thing he did was bring Rita back.
What I'm hearing is I know you're saying John Byrne. In my head, all I hear is Venditti.
You know, I'll give Venditti this. His most recent work has been a lot better. Like, I think Hal and Pals did a lot to try and fix the issues with his prior Green Lantern run. His Superman stories he's been doing from the Digital First stuff have been pretty solid. Like, they're kind of just basic meat and potato Superman stories.
Yeah.
And his Justice League run right now is, again, like I think he's kind of shifted to doing more, less destructive, more meat and potato stuff. I'm excited to see him maybe evolve into more interesting experimental works. But right now, like, he's not actively harming anything. It's not like a lot of people love his Hawkman run. I don't. And again, because it's wildly changing things. And you can do good retcons, like
retcons are fine. Thing. Yeah, you know what? I'm okay with retcons if the intention is right. And of course that's subjective as hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is it destructive? Is it negating things that you like?
Yeah, because of all the different retcons with Legion of Superheroes, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that.
Oh, man, Legion of Superheroes.
I'm not so okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm not really okay with that.
This is maybe a somewhat controversial statement I'm about to make. I think the retcon of Parallax and how it affects Hal Jordan's character is one of the most destructive retcons in comic book history.
Now, see, I disagree there because I understand the need to maintain the integrity of an IP. That's just the way it is. You're always going to have Hal Jordan. You can't have Hal Jordan be this awful thing. Like he didn't backhand Wanda or Janet, you know, but he did kill off Kilowog.
Yeah.
You've got to fix that.
No, you don't.
You do.
No.
And you know what?
Here's the thing. When he came out, kids didn't give a damn who Hal Jordan was. No one under the age of maybe 15 knew who Hal Jordan was. Jon Stewart was on TV. Kyle Rayner was in the books. We fixed the problem. Hal Jordan was a Spectre.
I don't like the fact you use the word "fix the problem."
We fixed the problem.
Because I'm a Hal Jordan fan. I steadfast against that.
And even then, he was the Spectre. That's way cooler. Yeah. That's so good. That was such a good direction for the character. He was actively atoning for his sins. And then Jeff Johns just like, Hal Jordan did nothing wrong in his life ever. Was he a drunk driver ever? No, that didn't happen. He never flew through a yellow sign.
Okay, let me now I'm not going to say that I'm an apologist for this whole thing, but I'm going to say that it wasn't as simple as that. For a lot of us, the story went through its regular course. He did do the Spectre. He did do his pendants because, granted, he had the Parallax whole thing in him. And he did do some horrible stuff. And he was in somewhat control of it. So it wasn't complete innocence. A lot of us feel like that the story came full circle. And he actually did repent for what he did, for what he was involved with. And the same thing happened to Iron Man because in Civil War, people didn't like Iron Man all of a sudden. And Marvel had no idea how to deal with this.
Let's be fair. People didn't like Iron Man for a long time.
Okay, now, Iron Man sold well. It sold sustainably. It was a character they could always go to. They did Civil War, and then suddenly people hated Iron Man.
Yeah, he was a bastard.
And it affected his sales, and it just pitted. And it's like, well, how are we going to solve this? Because we do have to absolve him of this if the character is going to survive as a sustainable IP. That's just the way it goes. Same thing goes with Hal. Yeah, granted, maybe it feels like a cop-out, but business-wise, I completely understand why they did it.
But
that said,
Hal Jordan's sins were interesting.
Well, they were interesting,
but he
weren't. Hal Jordan's sins were interesting, and they didn't go away. he still did them. They weren't erased. They still happened. But yes, a lot of fixes happened. Kilowog came back. Sinestro came back. A lot of people he killed came back. I honestly, off the top of my head, cannot tell you how that happened. I can't tell you how Kilowog came back. Kilowog
had come back before.
Really?
He was the original Black Lantern at the end of Kyle Rayner's run on as Green Lantern. It's in like the last 20 issues or so. He's like this kind of undead energy being. He's got a big old scythe. He looks cool as hell.
So, see, for me, I'm a little bit of old school. I enjoyed Hal and Sinestro. That was my cool story. You can't have that with Kyle.
It's true. And I think that is one of the biggest issues with Kyle's run is that he doesn't have an enemy as iconic as Sinestro.
Not really iconic. I mean, he has Major Force, but that's because
Not
Major
his
Force
own guy. Yeah.
Major Force came in and fridged his girl.
There's a couple of pretty good characters. There's Nero, who was introduced pretty late in the game, like early in Judd Winnick's run. And I really like Nero. I think he's a great character. I wish they developed him more before. I think they killed him off during Sinestro Corps War.
Yes.
And there's Effigy, who is he's interesting as a mirror.
He's the one that had the fire hair.
Yes, he was a creation of the Controllers. And I keep hoping they'll bring him back as some sort of tie into the Orange Lanterns. But I think his look was just too boring.
Yes, it was.
He looks like Firestorm, but somehow even lamer.
I felt the same way because I knew where they were going with Effigy. I was like, okay, great. He's cool. He's great. But he doesn't look very good. He kind of looks like if Firestorm and Wave Rider had a girl or had a boy baby or something like that. He just wasn't interesting.
Oh boy, we've gotten off track.
We really did, but you know what? I could tell because it's like we usually hit about an hour on our episodes, and I was like, wow, we're already done. I'm looking over at my producers throwing up little cards telling us how much time we've got. It's like, you know what? We got some time. We're gonna talk some Green Lantern.
So sorry everyone who just was expecting New Mutants coverage. But me and Casey both feel very strongly about Green Lantern.
Yes, very much so.
How did we even... I know how we got to this point.
Yes.
Because...
I said Venditti.
No, but even before that, we were talking about why Chris Claremont left. And that got us talking about John Byrne, which got us talking about retcons, which got us talking about Venditti, which got us talking about Green Lantern.
Boom.
Woo. Sorry, folks.
We were already off the topic with John Byrne to begin with. And it all comes from the fact because we can see how trends change as the decades go on with comics and comics fans, what we're hungry for. Whether we're hungry for in the 70s, which was Kung Fu, in the 80s, it was all that dark, gritty storytelling, like with Cloak and Dagger's introduction. And in the 90s, it was just about the flashiest art we could possibly get and all the crazy covers we're doing. And then in the double outs, we hated that crap and we hated costumes. Let's get down to the nitty gritty and make everybody kind of look normal, like with Morrison's run on X-Men. And everybody had the leather jackets and stuff like that. And now we're in the double outs where we're doing that, which was, for what I see, is the golden age of comics and comics media. And now 2020, what do we got ahead of us?
We'll see. But I think with that...
I think that just about does it.
Yeah, wrapping up, concluding thoughts. New Mutants by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz.
1 through 31 is what we've been talking about.
With Bob McLeod and Sal Buscema on the earlier issues. The early stuff has aged better than I expected to, with a few minor exceptions. The Sienkiewicz stuff has got a lot of problematic issues, but I think the work is strong enough that it's still worth a read in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't become so problematic that you're just wincing while you're reading it.
Yeah, it's just like a little frustrating because it's otherwise so good.
Because sensibilities these days are far different than they were 25 years ago.
Yeah. 35 at this
35
point.
years ago. God, I'm much older than I think I am. But yeah, this pretty much wraps up our entire New Mutants thing. I think going on further in our episodes, we're going to go back to our original format, which is reviewing comics and taking a look at news and all that kind of cool stuff. We do have comics coming in at a semi-regular basis.
Yeah. Every other week there's Marvel books. So I think we talked about maybe still doing the book club stuff on the off weeks. But
yeah, and I hear that a lot of studios are going back to shooting next month.
Oh,
I know that WandaVision starts up her shooting at the last of their episodes in July. And I don't know if that is also the case for Falcon and Winter Soldier, which also still needs to do its reshoots. We're still going to get episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier in August, and WandaVision, of course, premieres in December. So I'm still really looking forward to that.
Fingers crossed.
August is going to be a great month because we got Falcon, Winter Soldier, and The Mandalorian.
That's safe. Hopefully, barring another outbreak.
Well, they had Mandalorian season 2 in the can well before this all happened. And Falcon Winter Soldier was largely shot except for like the very last reshoots of the last episode. And when we're talking about this, they've actually talked about the fact that the second season might have a completely different title.
Yeah, interesting.
So I'm kind of going with that. Anyway, that does wrap it up here for Hazardous Materials, last week's comics, this week's. Like and subscribe, hit the bell, check out our Patreon, and of course we got a fantastic collection of social media links below here. And we'll see you next week.